He hurt my daughter. Wrong father. 25 years, I buried the operative I was. He crossed a line he can't uncross. They say revenge brings no peace. They're right. This mission is personal. I'm here for justice. Chapter 1. The call before the storm the night was too quiet for a city like Denver. The kind of quiet that warns you something's coming. I sat alone in my study, a glass of untouched whiskey by my side, eyes fixed on a photograph of my daughter, Paige. Her smile was the only thing that still kept me human. I'd spent 25 years in the shadows, classified missions, ghost operations, and black ops assignments no one would ever know about. I was the man who erased threats before they had names. But that life ended when I promised my daughter I'd never go back. I left the battlefield behind, or so I thought. At 3:17 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut told me to answer. The voice on the other end was trembling. "Mr. Reeves, it's about your daughter." My blood froze. In stories like these, you always expect the worst, but nothing prepares you for when it's real. "What about her?" I asked. "She's been hurt. They didn't know who she was." The words echoed like gunfire in my mind. I gripped the edge of the desk, forcing myself to breathe. My heart wasn't beating, it was detonating. I didn't ask who they were. I already knew. The Vargas family, a powerful mob syndicate that ruled Denver's underworld like kings. Arturo Vargas, the father. Mark Vargas, the reckless son. I'd spent years watching monsters like them destroy families, but this time they touched mine, and they had no idea who her father really was. I stood, the old instincts kicking in like they'd been waiting. The soldier inside me, the one I'd buried, was wide awake again. This wasn't about revenge for me. It was justice, a father's justice. In cinematic storytelling, they say every revenge story begins with a choice. Walk away or burn everything down. I'd already made mine. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I opened the safe under the floorboards and stared at the past I'd locked away. Military dog tags, a suppressed sidearm, and a folded photo of my unit. Men who'd lived and died in silence. This was more than a fight. This was a dark, emotional thriller written in real time. The kind of story YouTube audiences would call cinematic revenge, except I wasn't performing. As I loaded the weapon, my reflection in the window looked like a ghost from another life, one that never truly left. The city lights blinked faintly outside, unaware that tonight, a war was about to begin. Some fathers protect their daughters with words. Others, like me, protect them with everything else. And as the clock hit 3:42 a.m., I whispered a promise into the dark. They hurt my daughter. Now they'll learn who her father really is. The quiet night exhaled. The storm had just begun. Chapter 2. Into the fire, the first thing you lose in a revenge story isn't mercy. It's sleep. I hadn't closed my eyes since the call. Every second replayed in my mind like a broken tape. Paige's laughter, her birthday last month, the way she used to say I worried too much. She never knew what kind of man I used to be. Now she would. By sunrise, the soldier in me had already taken over. I moved like muscle memory, silent, efficient, controlled. The kind of movements that belong to a man trained to disappear. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a weapon reactivated by pain. I drove to the old cabin outside the city, where my equipment waited under dust and cobwebs. No one ever found this place, because no one ever lived to. Inside were the tools I'd sworn to bury with my past. Field gear, encrypted maps, burner phones, and the old tactical headset that still smelled like sand and gun oil. This was no ordinary rescue. This was a black ops revenge mission, a father's fight for justice disguised in silence. I connected the dots the way I always did, slow, precise, deadly. Paige's attacker wasn't random. He was Mark Vargas, the spoiled son of Arturo Vargas. the man who controlled half of Denver's underground network. Mark had a reputation for cruelty, but his arrogance was his weakness. He thought he was untouchable because of his father's shadow. But he had touched something sacred, something that would turn that shadow against him. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the vest, and watching my reflection fade into the ghost I used to be. This was cinematic, yes, but not fiction. This was the kind of AI cinematic story audiences watch and whisper, "What if it were real?" It is real. In the quiet, I loaded my gear, each click echoing like punctuation to a story that couldn't end well. The mind of a soldier doesn't forget how to kill. It just forgets why it shouldn't. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees like old war songs. My truck roared to life, headlights slicing through the fog. I was heading toward the city, toward the Vargas estate, toward the truth. Mason called my old agency contact. "You're really going back in?" "I never left," I replied. He sighed. "You're not thinking straight, Jack. This isn't a mission. It's revenge." "No," I said. "It's justice. The kind YouTube cinematic stories never get right. Because this time, the monster isn't the soldier. It's the father." I ended the call and drove faster. The highway stretched ahead like a scar. Somewhere out there, Mark Vargas was breathing easy, thinking his father's name would protect him. He was wrong. This wasn't just another revenge thriller. This was a promise written in blood and silence. A story not made for headlines, but for ghosts. And as the city skyline appeared, glowing like a target, I whispered the line that would guide me through hell. "You hurt my world. Now I'll burn yours." Chapter 3. Hunting shadows, the Vargas name moved through Denver like weather, inevitable and indifferent. I learned that hunting Mark wasn't about brute force. It was about patience, pattern, and picking the right moment. This was a revenge story with rules. Don't get seen, don't get caught, and leave a message that echoes. I began with small things. A surveillance sweep of his usual haunts, clubs, rooftop bars, and quiet streets where expensive cars sleep. Cameras framed his nights, but cameras also reveal patterns. I mapped his movements, recorded plates, and cataloged the bodyguard's rotations. Every empire has a routine, and routines are a hunter's map. My methods were old school and digital, binoculars for human detail, encrypted comms for the ghost work. Mason fed satellite dust and payroll lists while I watched footage in black and white, pausing on a laugh, a hand, a girl slipping away. Human detail makes the criminal. Pattern makes him vulnerable. At Levant Park, Mark liked to smoke by the fountain. I sat 2 benches over with a thermos, pretending to read. This was cinematic storytelling at its most mundane. Place the camera where the audience doesn't expect movement, then pull the rug. The night he showed up with 3 new guards, I noticed an extra vehicle, a driver with a nervous tic, and a route through alleys instead of main roads. The tic told a story. Money pressure, fear, someone unsettled. Pressure creates mistakes. Mistakes create openings. I followed them 2 nights to learn. Their route passed an old service elevator behind a pharmaceutical warehouse, rarely used, easy to access, and blind to most security cameras. It became the weak link. If you craft a revenge thriller for YouTube, you need proof the hunter isn't a myth. I collected it, photos, timestamps, and a map on a motel notepad. I planted a breadcrumb, a cigarette, but of a rare brand Mark favored, left by the elevator door. He noticed it the next night, spat and laughed. Pride is poor armor. My aim wasn't to kill him in the street. It was to make him feel exposed, seen, to make the Vargas family understand their untouchability was an illusion. I staged small embarrassments, a hacked voicemail release, a blackout during a fundraiser, and a viral photo that placed him where he swore he wasn't. Each small victory tightened the web. Fans of dark storytelling crave watching power unravel. That's the algorithm's hunger. Show the fall, show consequence, and viewers stay until the last frame. By week's end, Mark's smile had worry lines. Security tightened. Nights grew shorter. He began to look over his shoulder. That was the moment the hunter waits for, when arrogance becomes fear. I documented everything carefully. Evidence, timestamps, and whisper lines that would read in a narration. Father, daughter justice, Black Ops operative, cinematic revenge. These weren't just props for a story. They were anchors that would make the narrative clear to anyone listening. Live audiences and algorithm needed those markers to know what this tale was about. Chapter 4. Echoes of War. The night, rain, carried memories. For most people, it meant quiet or reflection. For me, it meant movement, noise to cover the sound of entry, scent to confuse dogs, and darkness to reset a man's fear. I wasn't the same father who once fixed Paige's bike under summer sky. I'd become something else, what the agency used to call a clean asset. Mark Vargas thought he was safe behind men with rifles and cameras. But men like me, we don't walk through doors. We rewrite the blueprint. Every step I took toward him was an echo from a forgotten war. My hands remembered pressure points. My breath remembered silence. In cinematic narration, that's what separates a killer from a protector. One hunts for ego, the other hunts for peace. At 0200 hours, I entered the tunnel network under Denver's industrial quarter. Mason had called it Ratlins for ghosts. Old prohibition routes, used now by criminals who thought they invented secrecy. I smiled. The military taught me the math of violence: time, distance, reaction. Tonight, I was solving an equation. Each corridor whispered history. Rusted pipes, dripping condensation, echoing footsteps of men who never made it back. I checked my wrist monitor, thermal signatures up ahead, 3, stationary. Guard rotation, low alert. Perfect. People think revenge stories are explosions and shouting. But true revenge is soundless. It's about control. The thrill in this kind of AI storytelling isn't in the blood. It's in the pause before it falls. I crept closer, felt the trigger break like breath, and 3 lives disappear before they even felt wind. The tunnel opened into a storage bay beneath one of Vargas's shell companies. Files, crates, and hard drives. Proof of everything they'd built on suffering. I began downloading. Names scrolled across the tablet like confessions. Mason's voice crackled in my ear. "You're making history, Simon. You sure you want to burn it?" I stared at the screen. "No, I'm rewriting it." That's the paradox of every Black Ops father story. You destroy to protect. Viewers don't come for perfection. They come for the moral fracture, the man who's both savior and sinner. The algorithm recognizes that emotional polarity. It keeps audiences from clicking away. As the last file transferred, I heard movement. More guards, heavier footsteps. I slipped into the shadows behind an oil drum. They passed within inches. I could smell their cologne. Cheap courage. One dropped a cigarette. I watched the ember fade. Fire always betrays the untrained. Once they were gone, I exhaled. The mission wasn't over, but the message was clear. Mark Vargas's empire had cracks, and I was the hammer finding each one. When I reached the surface again, Denver was silent. Streetlights flickered. Somewhere out there, my daughter slept without knowing her father had become a ghost again. But that's what fathers do. They disappear into the dark so their children can stay in the light. The hunt wasn't vengeance anymore. It was maintenance of peace, the kind built on ashes and truth. Chapter 5. The trap tightens. Every mission has a turning point. The moment when patience turns to pursuit. For me, it came 2 nights later when Mark Vargas finally made his move. He thought he was hunting me. In reality, he'd walked straight into a maze built by a Black Ops operative who'd been writing his obituary for weeks. I was stationed inside an abandoned apartment overlooking a freight yard. From here, I could see his convoy, 3 SUVs, matte black, running with military precision. They swept the area, infrared beams slicing the night. I smiled. He'd learned, but not fast enough. Revenge storytelling thrives on symmetry. He hurt my daughter, so I dismantle his family, piece by piece, quietly, efficiently. The audience may see a cinematic revenge thriller, but for me, this was maintenance of justice. Mason's voice came through the earpiece. They've deployed 6 men ahead, 2 snipers. You got maybe 10 minutes before the perimeter tightens. Plenty, I whispered. I'm moved like water, controlled, silent, invisible. The rooftop was slick with rain, but my boots held. Below, guards moved in pairs, scanning alleys, checking doors. They were predictable, mechanical. And predictable enemies are easy to write off a story. I took the first sniper without sound. The second dropped before his radio could click. 2 shots, 2 ghosts erased. As I repositioned, my thermal feed caught something strange, a heat source moving against the convoy's rhythm. Smaller, faster. Civilian maybe. Then the feed focused. A woman, early 30s, shaking, barefoot. She wasn't one of mine. She was a hostage. Mark was sending a message. You want justice? Earn it. That's when this became more than vengeance. It became moral warfare. The kind of storytelling AI narrators love because it digs into guilt, choice, and humanity. I recalibrated. The mission now had 2 objectives: save her and send a warning. I followed her signal to a side warehouse. Inside, a single bulb swung above her, duct-taped, terrified but alive. The guard outside was careless, scrolling through his phone. I waited for the moment his screen flashed bright, then used it as my cover light. A single suppressed shot, and he dropped. When I freed her, she whispered, "They said you'd come." "Who told you that?" "Someone named Mason." My pulse froze. Mason was my eyes and ears. Or so I thought. Outside, I heard engines roaring to life. The convoy was pulling back, but not retreating. They were redirecting. Toward my house. Toward Paige's memories. That's the thing about revenge. It evolves. Just when you think you've cornered the enemy, you realize the story's being written from both sides. As I watched the SUVs vanish into the fog, I understood the next act wasn't about killing. It was about exposure. Mason's betrayal had rewritten the narrative, and I had less than 12 hours before the Vargas family made their final play. Chapter 6, Betrayal Code. When you've worked Black Ops for 25 years, betrayal isn't new. It's expected, but betrayal from someone you trusted, that cuts through the armor deeper than any bullet. Mason had been my ghost partner since Kandahar. We'd shared blood, secrets, and silence. I taught him how to vanish. He taught me how to track. Now he was tracking me. The irony would have been poetic if it wasn't fatal. I replayed his last transmission, static, a clipped breath, and they're heading toward your safe house. It wasn't a warning. It was confirmation. He'd sold my coordinates. Dark cinematic storytelling thrives on reversals like this. The hunter becomes the hunted. The ally becomes the villain. The line between loyalty and leverage blurs. It's what keeps an audience glued, what makes the algorithm recognize emotional gravity. I drove through the rain, headlights off, mind running, silent tactical calculations. The Vargas family had power, but Mason had access. Every encrypted route, every blind drop, every safe passage, I'd handed him those keys. At 2:43 a.m., I reached the old farmhouse safe house. The door was ajar. No guards, no traps, just emptiness. I stepped inside, weapon raised. The air was wrong, too still. Then I saw it, on the wall, scrawled in red spray paint. You taught me everything except mercy. Mason's handwriting. I found a tablet left on the table, screen flickering with surveillance feeds. My own. Footage from the warehouse, from my motel, even from my daughter's grave. Every angle I'd used to study my enemies, Mason had mirrored back at me. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was exposure warfare. He'd been uploading clips under a coded channel, Operative_25, turning my hunt into a viral dark series. The thumbnails? Real surveillance stills. Titles like Father Hunt's Mob Heir, 25 Years of Silence, and the Black Ops Operative's Final Mission. The algorithm was feeding on it. Millions of views. My life, weaponized as content. For the first time, I understood the scale. Mason wasn't just betraying me. He was monetizing me, turning my justice into entertainment. That realization burned hotter than any vengeance I planned. I smashed the tablet, shards scattering across the wooden floor. Then I found the camera he'd hidden above the window. I looked straight into it. "You want a story, Mason?" I said quietly. "Here's the ending you don't control." I shut off the power, plunged the place into darkness, and activated a counter-surveillance jammer. If you want to play Digital Predator, I'd go analog. No signals, no traces, just old-school reckoning. As I walked out into the rain, thunder rolled across the valley. Each strike felt like a countdown to confrontation. Mason had written his own betrayal code. Now I was going to rewrite it with fire, silence, and justice. Because when a father hunts for his daughter's peace, no algorithm, no betrayal, no ghost can stop the story from reaching its final act. Chapter 7. The final act. Every operation ends the same way: silence before the storm. For 25 years, I'd lived by codes, by shadows, by precision. But this wasn't a mission anymore. This was personal. This was the final act of a father's revenge story, one the algorithm of fate itself couldn't rewrite. The night was cold, moonless. I moved through the forest, every step calculated, every breath controlled. My heartbeat synced with the rhythm of the rain. Somewhere beyond the trees, Mason and the Vargas heir waited, confident, arrogant, unaware that the man they betrayed had become something darker than death. In cinematic storytelling, this is where the frame slows. The audience leans in. The hero doesn't speak. He prepares. My gloves tightened. My rifle clicked once, safety off. My world narrowed into a single objective: justice. When I reached the clearing, floodlights snapped on. Mason stood beside the mob boss's son, both armed, both smiling. "You taught me to survive," Mason said. "Now I'll show the world who you really are." His words echoed like a live broadcast. Cameras around the perimeter blinked red, recording. He wanted to stream my end, to turn vengeance into viewership. But what Mason didn't know was that I'd already hijacked his network. Every feed, every lens, every drone mine. I wasn't just in his story anymore. I was writing it. "Go ahead," I said, lowering my weapon slightly. "Tell them." He smirked. "You're a murderer, a ghost soldier, a man who can't let go of war. And you," I replied, "are proof that some lessons never reach the soul." Then, before his next breath, I triggered the EMP charge I'd planted beneath their control hub. The forest exploded with white static. Every screen went black. Silence swallowed their digital empire. In the chaos, I moved like a phantom. The Vargas boy fired blindly. Mason tried to flank, but I was already behind him. One swift motion disarmed. A second, immobilized. "Why her?" I demanded. My voice trembled, but not from fear. "She was leverage," he coughed. "Collateral." I froze. In that single word, all 25 years of discipline cracked. My daughter's laughter, her small hands clutching my dog tags, all flashed before me. "This isn't collateral," I said quietly. "This is consequence." A single suppressed shot echoed through the storm. Justice was served, not with rage, but with finality. When the rain eased, I walked to the edge of the clearing, blood mixing with mud beneath my boots. No audience, no alborito, no applause. Just silence. I left behind their weapons, their wreckage, and the past. Somewhere, far beyond the forest, a new sun was rising. And for the first time in decades, it wasn't on a battlefield. I looked at the horizon and whispered, "For you, Emily." Story over. The final line of this revenge thriller wasn't written in violence. It was written in peace. Because true justice isn't viral. It's quiet. It's earned. Chapter 7. The final act. Every operation ends the same way. Silence before the storm. For 25 years, I'd lived by codes, by shadows, by precision. But this wasn't a mission anymore. This was personal. This was the final act of a father's revenge story. One the algorithm of fate itself couldn't rewrite. The night was cold, moonless. I moved through the forest, every step calculated, every breath controlled. My heartbeat synced with the rhythm of the rain. Somewhere beyond the trees, Mason and the Vargas heir waited, confident, arrogant, unaware that the man they betrayed had become something darker than death. In cinematic storytelling, this is where the frame slows. The audience leans in. The hero doesn't speak, he prepares. My gloves tightened. My rifle clicked once, safety off. My world narrowed into a single objective, justice. When I reached the clearing, floodlights snapped on. Mason stood beside the mob boss's son, both armed, both smiling. "You taught me to survive," Mason said. "Now I'll show the world who you really are." His words echoed like a live broadcast. Cameras around the perimeter blinked red, recording. He wanted to stream my end, to turn vengeance into viewership. But what Mason didn't know was that I'd already hijacked his network. Every feed, every lens, every drone mine. I wasn't just in his story anymore. I was writing it. "Go ahead," I said, lowering my weapon slightly. "Tell them." He smirked. "You're a murderer, a ghost soldier, a man who can't let go of war. And you," I replied, "are proof that some lessons never reach the soul." Then, before his next breath, I triggered the EMP charge I'd planted beneath their control hub. The forest exploded with white static. Every screen went black. Silence swallowed their digital empire. In the chaos, I moved like a phantom. The Vargas boy fired blindly. Mason tried to flank, but I was already behind him. One swift motion disarmed. A second, immobilized. "Why her?" I demanded. My voice trembled, but not from fear. "She was leverage," he coughed. "Collateral." I froze. In that single word, all 25 years of discipline cracked. My daughter's laughter, her small hands clutching my dog tags, all flashed before me. "This isn't collateral," I said quietly. "This is consequence." A single suppressed shot echoed through the storm. Justice was served, not with rage, but with finality. When the rain eased, I walked to the edge of the clearing, blood mixing with mud beneath my boots. No audience, no alborito, no applause. Just silence. I left behind their weapons, their wreckage, and the past. Somewhere, far beyond the forest, a new sun was rising. And for the first time in decades, it wasn't on a battlefield. I looked at the horizon and whispered, "For you, Emily." Story over. The final line of this revenge thriller wasn't written in violence. It was written in peace. Because true justice isn't viral. It's quiet. It's earned. Chapter 8. Aftermath and reflection. The silence after vengeance is the loudest sound in the world. It doesn't echo. It lingers. I walked away from that forest carrying two things, my scars and my daughter's memory. The storm had passed, but the weight inside me hadn't. For men like me, peace isn't found, it's negotiated. And sometimes it comes at the cost of everything. Back at the cabin, the smell of gun oil and rain mixed with burnt dust. I sat at the table where it all started. Maps scattered, bullet casings lined like trophies of regret. My hands trembled as I picked up a small locket I'd carried for years. Inside was Emily's photo, 6 years old, smiling, missing a front tooth. That single image was my compass through every mission. Every shadow, every kill. Dark storytelling isn't about the violence. It's about what it costs the soul. This revenge thriller had begun as fury, but somewhere between the blood and betrayal, it turned into confession. I poured myself a drink, not to celebrate, but to mourn, to understand the weight of what I'd done. The television flickered on by itself. Static. Then a headline. Unknown operative destroys mob network. No survivors identified. I smirked. The world didn't need my name. Legends work best in silence. Still, I couldn't escape the thought that Mason had been right about one thing. The world feeds on stories like mine. The algorithm loves pain packaged as purpose, rage edited into redemption. But what no machine will ever understand is the truth behind it. Real justice isn't cinematic. It's human. It's messy. It's what happens when a father refuses to die before his daughter's memory rests. I took out my old field recorder, the same one I used to log missions. For once, I didn't encrypt the file. Mission log 47, I said softly. Objective complete. Threat neutralized. Collateral irreparable. But Emily, your father kept his promise. You're safe now, wherever you are. My voice cracked. The words weren't for records. They were for forgiveness. Outside, dawn broke over the valley. The rain had stopped. I stepped outside and watched sunlight slice through the clouds. For the first time in decades, I didn't scan the horizon for targets. No enemies. No orders. Just the sound of nature breathing again. I buried the recorder beneath a tree and marked it with my knife. Not as a soldier, but as a father. The revenge story was over. What began as a cinematic black ops thriller ended as a eulogy. In that quiet, I found something unexpected. Not peace, but acceptance. Because justice had been served, not just for her, but for me too. Chapter 9. The vault reopens, they say, once a soldier leaves the field, the war leaves with him. They're wrong. The battlefield just changes shape. It had been 6 months since the forest burned, since Mason and the Vargas bloodline were erased from every digital trace. Yet peace never came. It sat just out of reach, like the trigger you swear you'll never pull again. I had disappeared completely. New name, new country, a cabin hidden in the mountains of Montana. No network, no phone, no signal. Just quiet. But quiet, I've learned, can be a dangerous sound. Every night, I'd sit by the fire writing. Not mission reports, stories. True ones. The kind of stories that algorithms can't generate because they bleed too much truth. Revenge stories. Family secrets. The things we bury in vaults. That's when the idea of the vault came to me. A private archive, a confessional space for every silent operative, every betrayed father, every voice that had been erased. If my story could find meaning, maybe others could too. This wasn't about content anymore. It was about legacy. One night, while transferring my notes to an encrypted drive, the screen flickered. An email appeared. Untraceable sender, 0 metadata. Subject line, you thought the vault was yours alone? I froze. That voice in my head, the one that never left me from the old days, whispered, they found you. Attached was a video clip. I opened it carefully. Grainy footage. My cabin. Recorded from outside. And then a distorted voice. Justice isn't done. Operative. The world still owes you its secrets. It wasn't Mason. It wasn't Vargas. It was someone else. Someone who had been watching. I leaned back, exhaled slowly. So this was it. The next phase. The story hadn't ended. It had evolved. In every revenge thriller, there's a hidden layer. A reminder that peace and danger are twins. And if this was my next mission, I wasn't running from it. I was documenting it. I opened a fresh file and typed the first line, "The vault reopens." Because stories like mine never truly end, they echo. They become parables for justice, warnings against arrogance, and testaments to the human cost of secrets. Somewhere out there, someone wanted to reopen old wounds. But I had learned something through pain. A man who's already lost everything isn't afraid to lose again. I closed the laptop, loaded my weapon, and stepped outside into the snow. The mountains watched in silence. The storm was returning, and this time, I would be ready. Because even after 25 years of Black Ops, the real mission was never survival. It was redemption, and redemption always begins with a story. Chapter 10. Legacy of Silence. The wind howled across the Montana ridge, carrying the faint smell of pine and snow. I stood outside the cabin, watching the horizon fade into the kind of darkness that once hid men like me, shadows within shadows. For years, I believed my past was buried under classified ink and burned files. But the truth about the Black Ops world is simple. No operation ever truly ends. It just waits to be reactivated. Inside, the old radio crackled. No frequency, just static. Yet somehow, in the rhythm of that static, I heard something familiar, the sound of orders, the rhythm of command. My pulse slowed, instinct kicking in like muscle memory. Someone wanted to awaken the operative in me again. I poured myself a glass of bourbon and stared at the wall of notes pinned behind the desk. Photos, maps, timelines, all connected by red string. A private war mapped out like a confession. Paige's picture sat in the center. My daughter, my reason, my line in the sand. She thought I'd retired. She believed I'd let the past die. But fathers like me don't retire. We just change uniforms. My now was silence. The email had led to coordinates, encrypted, military style. I decoded them, out of habit more than curiosity. They pointed to one place I swore I'd never return. Montenegro. The site of my final mission. The place that ended my career and almost my life. Someone out there knew everything. My real name. My past kills. My family. The vault wasn't just my idea anymore. It had been breached. I looked out the window. The snowstorm was growing, wrapping the cabin in white silence. My mind, though, was back in the field, calculating distances, exits, contingencies. If they wanted me to come out of hiding, fine. But they'd forgotten one thing. I wasn't just a Black Ops operative. I was a father who had nothing left to lose. I recorded one final message, a voice log encrypted under the vault archive. To whoever finds this, know this truth. Every monster I faced carried a reason. Every mission I completed carried a price. And every silence I kept was to protect someone who never knew how much I loved them. I saved the file, titled it Legacy of Silence, and locked the drive. Then I turned off the lights, grabbed my duffel, and stepped into the cold. As I descended the snowy trail, the first rays of dawn began to rise. The world below was unaware of the ghosts walking among them. But somewhere deep inside the vault, my story was no longer just mine. It was every man's who ever fought for family, lost peace, and found redemption through justice. And if the world ever forgot what justice looked like, I'd remind them one last time.